All right, thanks for that introduction, Brian. So I'll now open it up to the participants. So I see we've got 8 people in. So I know there's a couple of people who've got their cameras off, but if they want to come in, they can just send a message. Um, Anyone else who has their camera on, just indicate with their hand. So I've got view of everyone who's in the meeting. So if you want to come in and make a point, just indicate with your hand, and I'll bring you in. Brian, he may want to come back on what you say, or he may let the conversation go on a while. So,
I tend to let it flow and then
yep,
come back later on.
yep. Okay, so I'll just invite people to come in. Yeah, Chris.
Okay. Everybody hear me all right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for that, Brian. Just more or less to break the silence. The point that you made about the severity of the American penal system, I think is probably very important. And I think I came across the article by Jonathan Cook where he pointed that out. And I don't know what sort of traction that has had in the campaign, either here or elsewhere, but I think it's an important departure because Nils Melzer found that Julian Assange had been basically tortured in a Belmarsh prison. But Baritzer actually found that the American penal system was more severe than that and that he wasn't fit to be sent to it. So it gives lieu for the campaign to be extended in the US side against the severity of the penal system and all the issues that are surrounding that as well. Has anybody else mentioned that, or is anybody else doing any work on that?
Hi. Yeah, just there is a large American campaign, and Chomsky is part of that, as is Alice Walker, and they seem to be fairly active. But in relation to that specific point, Chris, I don't. I think with this case that there's just so many different aspects that are just glaringly obvious that there's been such a, there's a complete abuse of justice. I mean, there hasn't been any justice throughout. So there's, the issue for our campaign is what to focus on, as you point out, really. And I put a question earlier on, which just relates to Assange's current situation in Belmarsh prison. And I wondered if Brian had had any update. I tuned into a webinar that was coming from England a couple of days ago. And there was a lawyer that's been campaigning, throughout. And she was saying that Julian is still suffering from severe coldness, and as we all know, he's in a COVID-19 ward there. So I sense that, that is an immediate thing for the campaign to action on, and I wondered if anyone here knew of or had any thoughts on that in relation to who we could approach. I thought initially it was Priti Patel, but then we had a few other suggestions. So just in terms of the campaign and the angle, that was one thing. And just the other thing to mention is that in terms of the press freedoms and freedom of expression, that it's wider than journalists and publishers. It also extends to human rights groups as well, according to lawyers for Assange. And it also applies to any country now. It has actually set a very dangerous precedent, whereby any country, powerful state that feels that something has been printed that they find uncomfortable truths can go through a similar scenario. So I had this discussion with a friend of mine who's very politically active, you know, and is aware, more, you know, very politically aware, and just threw this out saying, you know, that's British law, it doesn't apply to us. And I think that's something that hasn't come through again in the campaign, just how wide-reaching these implications are. It's not just between the UK and the US. It could extend to anywhere. And it could be, you know, it really is a case of first they came for Assange and I did nothing. So, yeah, just a couple of thoughts there, just to keep our discussion going after that great intro from Brian.
John?
Well, I'm going to feed in a bit of news, and that is that there's I think one of the Assange committee put it up. There's a notice up that the US have filed an appeal against the refusal of extradition, and the magistrate has given them 2 weeks to prepare their case. Now, I would tend to agree with Brian that there isn't anything about this case that isn't political. And there's a very strong movement within the British establishment to establish impunity for state forces. So they've got laws going through to give impunity to troops, and they have another law to give impunity to undercover agents in left-wing organisations and so on. And so, you know, quite clearly, they have no problem with the idea that anybody giving away any information at all about what the state does should be locked up. So they're in tune with the US. On the other hand, the micro politics is that Trump's out, Biden's coming in, and it may well be that the British feel that it's a good idea to give Biden the chance to drop this if he doesn't want to be bothered with it. And the other thing is that so this appeal by the US lawyers, it's by US lawyers under Trump, and I'm sure we're all aware that Trump has been planting dragon's teeth all over the place, you know, simply to obstruct Biden. So that's a sort of minor background thing. The thing is that if extradition is refused, and if Assange is released, then the ruling of the judge becomes so much paper. Any further attempts to establish this level of reach by the state would have to start all over again. But if Assange is extradited, then the finding of the magistrate, I think, becomes case law, and it becomes much easier for the US to reach out again, and for the British state also to reach out, and anybody else who wants to extend their arm towards journalists. I have something else to say, but I'll stop there just to see what other people think.
Yeah, can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
The case of I mean I've been aware of Assange for maybe 10 years possibly. This and he was a very major figure, and you know, in the media, and he was he was considered to be something of a hero for the leaks, and this was part of the part of the new age of the internet, and what that could allow, to the freedom and the ability to get this information and expose the levels of corruption. And it was quite a hopeful thing for a lot of people. I think it was quite a, but it was also a big flag of resistance for people as well. And there's no it's no surprise that eventually they tried to shut him down. I mean, there was always a point where you think, well, maybe this is a new weapon we have, and as in the case with a lot of internet freedoms, it's just increasingly shut down. And now the internet is seen as a thing of of great. In many ways, it's true. A lot of very extremely negative kind of phenomena. With social media, these kind of things. But Assange was a sign of the other side of that sort of the internet. If you look at the first decade of the 2000s, you've got the 9/11 and the war against terrorism and the Iraq War and and also the anti-capitalist movement as well. So certainly the states and the leaderships in power definitely would saw a threat there, and certainly that climate hasn't gone away. The climate that took hold in after 2000 is still there, and it's very anti freedom, very anti anybody who wants to expose the system. Individuals are seen as dangerous subversives, and much worse than it ever was, decades ago. With you got people like journalists like John Pilger, who was very much in the mainstream press, and then has increasingly become something a real outsider. People like that, and this kind of thing. So it's a real attack on, and it's attack. It's sustained. It's not just a drop in the ocean. It's a sustained attack, and it's increasing and it's growing. And absolutely, this is the time to stand up against it. So we can't stop the support of Assange, and this is going to happen to increasingly with other people as well.
Yeah, John.
Right. I just want to narrow the thing down a bit, really. I mean, most people in the meeting are probably familiar with solidarity campaigns against people who are being victimized. And they have a standard pattern, which is you get some unions, left political parties and so on, and they get behind a campaign. You try and widen the support of the campaign. You target people that you think you might be able to put pressure on. And the difficulty with this campaign, and there's people in the meeting who are on the Free Assange Ireland thing, is that by dint of enormous levels of energy, the campaign had some initial support with basically with some members, some Sinn Féin TDs and some people for profit and raised, and but that support was quite limited. It was sort of the campaign had a meeting. Some of the TDs signed a statement of support, and some of them came out to the meeting, and nobody volunteered to join the campaign. And I found it a lot worse in the north. In the north, I cannot get any of these political groups to say a word. You know, they won't answer their emails because they don't want to say they're for Assange, in my opinion, and don't want to say they're against him. And there's a similar issue around the unions, because the NUJ has issued a general statement of support for Assange and an appeal for help, but that has never coalesced into any real action. The NUJ hasn't been very active, and I actually am in one of the teachers' unions, know the people in the leadership, was in the leadership myself, and chased after them. And they clearly were not going to get involved. And you would have thought that if we'd been able to use the NUJ statement, we would have been able to put some pressure on them. The other thing is, as has been referred to already, is that the Irish press have largely ignored this issue altogether, just not reported it. And the British press aren't actually too far behind them. Their reporting has been very, very minimal. So I'm not quite sure. I think, so there's three targets there. Is there any way we can get at the political parties? Is there any way that we can put some pressure on the local press? And is there any way that the NUJ can be brought to take a more leadership role? That's basically my three questions.
You want me to come back in, Jonathan, or would you let it continue for a bit?
If you want to come back, is there anything particular you want to come back on? Like, let the conversation continue. You know, but
yeah, just let it continue. Then I'll come back at the end. Then.
Yeah, I'd agree with John. I'm a member of Free Assange Ireland, as a couple of other people are. Yeah, it's. I mean, we've got a core group of really active people, and it's always great to get a response back. And I know John's had particular problems in the north, and it is really surprising when you consider what's at stake really here. Now, I'm just wondering, as I mentioned earlier with a friend of mine, and again, we're in a COVID lockdown situation here anyway, so I'm not bumping into people, you know, and having those chats, and you know, that does actually make a difference really from being kind of isolated. We're all kind of isolated ourselves really, but this idea that actually what is happening is not going to greatly affect certainly people in Ireland, you know. And I do think that, and I know we've been trying to get, you know, high profile Irish public figures involved, but just being able to reach out, you know, as John was saying, to unions, the student unions, you know, I've been reaching out to. Again, there's been hardly any response back. There is this whole myth that we're battling against regarding the rape allegations, that, you know, that is there. And I know from members that were in Galway that were giving out leaflets before COVID, that was one of the main issues that came up with people that they've spoken to. I mean, I do want to, you know, there's lots of positive things here, but I just think that at the moment we're at a really, really crucial stage, and I think it's important to identify weaknesses. I think the strengths are that we've got a global campaign here going, and it's gone from strength to strength. That's obviously mainly online, and that's something we should continue to, you know, to link up with. And there is mass solidarity there. But my concern really is to keep our momentum going here in Ireland, and not feel the setbacks. You know, while the internet's great, there are setbacks to it, really. And I, for one, find it strange connecting up with people who I haven't really met. You know, I speak with John and a couple of other people that are here, you know, on a weekly basis, but actually I don't know them at all, you know. So, and the other thing, and I'm just putting this out here, I'm just wondering if people, you know, at the moment, really struggling with COVID-19 and actually taking on something like this is a big ask at the moment. So perhaps people's involvement, we should also think about as well. You know, there's a lot of anxiety around COVID-19, naturally enough. You know, so yeah. But I think there are positives, and I think the positive thing is that we've got groups throughout the world, which has to be a positive thing.
I'll just ask a few general points. That sort of history of relationship between the mainstream media and WikiLeaks has changed quite dramatically over the period, because at the start they were, I think, publications like The Guardian and the New York Times had joint projects with WikiLeaks to publish material, sort of the diplomatic cables and the war logs, and quite a lot of collaboration in that early period. You know, even the local papers here, the Free Belfast newspapers that were part of that. So why did this turn against WikiLeaks come around? Was it someone mentioned the influence of identity politics? Was these sort of liberal publications so taken up with identity politics once the allegations of sexual assault have been made against Assange, that was a complete turn off for them? Or was there something else going on that they wanted to they saw this platform, these sort of online platforms, as sort of upstarts and threat to their position? So was it like an attempt to sort of put down a rival, or sort of jealousy? What sort of motivations were feeding into the press media hostility that came towards WikiLeaks and Assange?
Yeah, Jonathan, I would say it was the latter point, really, because I've come across several journalists that worked on The Guardian through the webinars and continued to be part of the Assange campaign. Whereas there were several, you know, the editorial part of it all, and higher up the ranks, let's say, certainly saw WikiLeaks as a threat. And the whole drop-down box just changed, radically revolutionized journalism, you know. And I mean, I have an issue around this. You know, we all talk about free press, but have we really got a free press? And when I was researching a play, WikiLeaks on Trial, way before the court hearing, you know, I was relying on John Pilger. I was relying on independent journalists that had mainly broadcast on YouTube, because there wasn't anything in the mainstream press. you know, so issues around UC Global, who were spying on Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy, that was all investigated by a journalist, an independent journalist. And it's those journalists really that you know, my concern goes out to, because they're doing really valuable work, and how they're getting funding is through people like you, me, you know, people that respect the work that they're doing and seeing it as important. So we are witnessing a huge change in how things are being reported. And you know, my concern really is that how those journalists' voices are going to be silenced. But I would say it's the latter thing, that it was a threat to the establishment.
Yeah, John. No, your audio's off, John.
As I understand it, the Guardian and New York Times were equally targets of this offensive. You know, when Assange was tried, there was actually no grounds, legal grounds, in which the Guardian and the New York Times couldn't have been charged as well. And so they disappeared, although they did exactly the same thing at Assange, because they disappeared off the charge sheet. And I think that was a big element in silencing anything to do with Assange. And I think there's been a big attack, starting in America mostly, I think, and also a big retreat going with it. You know, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, basically the attitude of the left was US out of here, US out of there, you know, and that was reasonably simple and straightforward. And I'm still all for US out of everywhere, but there's a sort of, you know, we can't oppose the US without saying something about Russia and China as well, and criticizing homegrown dictators and so on. And it's just, again, that's sort of a slide towards identity politics and emotion. You know, the sort of cohesive idea of forces, you know, fighting against each other has gone. You know, that's not the main thing, but the main thing is the press are quite frightened by all this and want to keep well away from it and keep their nose clean.
All right, so we're coming towards the end of the discussion part of the meeting. So does anyone else want to come in before I bring Brian back? No, so I'll just move to the summary.